Hey everybody, in today's video, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about what is debugging and why it's important skills as a developer, because when you're starting to learn how to code, you feel like everything's a challenge and it's like, why isn't this working? And unfortunately, that's kind of what we do all of our career, is try to figure out why things aren't working and fix them. And so if you don't like it, that's okay. I don't think anybody always finds it fun. Sometimes it's more fun than other times, but there are ways to make it better and where it can start to feel more like a puzzle rather than overwhelming or terrifying. So in this video, we're going to go through some ways to debug, how to be a better debugger, and how to let it not get the best of you. Let's go. So first of all, let's talk about what debugging is. And we throw that term around a lot, but basically it means something isn't working and I don't know why. And debugging is the process of digging through, okay, I've got my code that says this, it's not doing on the web page what I want it to do. How do I make it do that? And thankfully, there's a lot of tools available to help you sort through that. And so one of the things that I love the absolute most is the console in Chrome. And so if you've never used this before, right click, open inspector, let me move myself over here, and click on this console tab, and you will see all sorts of things coming through in your console here. Some of them are warnings, some of them are important, some of them aren't. But yeah, so you can put things in here that you want to see. So for instance, you can see I actually, in my code here, I have a console log that is showing the window location and path name. And literally all you need to do to make that show up in your code is do console.log and then in parentheses put whatever you want. And so you could literally put some text if you want to see, like, is something firing or not, which sometimes I do. I am apparently a 5th grade boy, and one of my favorite things to do is just use poop. When I don't know what I want to say or whatever, I just use poop. And so when you save that and your page refreshes, notice you see over here, it will show up in your console. And that's super helpful for if you're trying to figure out, like, is something firing and is it not? Because when you're debugging, you might have a function that doesn't work, and it's like, the problem could be that the function isn't being triggered. It could be that the problem is the function isn't re-triggering, or like has the wrong input or the wrong output. And so this is a good way to debug. If you just stick this inside whatever function it is, it's a good way to debug. Is it even happening? And if it's not, then you know to back up and you need to kind of change the event or wherever you've placed the function because it's not calling it. If that is working, then you can grab things inside the function. Or, you know, for instance, if you're trying to see, well, when I click on a tab, it's not going to the right place. You can see, well, what does it think the selected tab is? And so you can see Copilot's trying to show me that myself here. So I have console log selected tab. Let me save that. And this is where it's actually grabbing something from your app and it's going to print it so you can see what it is. So I can see, like, oh, okay, it thinks we're on the event tab, which we are. That's correct. Now let's see if that changes when I go to guests. Oh, it does. See? Notice we say, well, whoops, no, down there. So funnily enough, it's actually, this is a React thing where it's like showing you your previous state. And so it refreshes by the time, like if I were to refresh this page, it would actually say guests. Maybe it wouldn't. Let me see. So this is some real live debugging here. Like, why is that saying events? It's probably because it's like actually cached it, even though, so now when I go back here, it's going to say guest. Cached isn't the right word, but it's just like one behind. So, or it's just going to keep saying events. So this is some other bug that I'm going to have to debug here and figure out, why is a selected tab always selected? And you know what? I know exactly why it is now that I think about it, because I'm not actually using this to change the selected tab ID, because I forgot I'm using another way to actually route through what it is. So I'm not even using the selected tab. So that's why it's not even hooked up. So that's one thing I learned right away. So I really like using the console. Other things you can use are, you can use depending on what you're working in, you can use the Redux or the React extensions that, Dev Tools, sorry, that's the word I'm going for. These Dev Tools you can add as Chrome extensions, and you can add them in here, and it's going to show you things like, what does your tree look like? Because sometimes I find this most helpful when I'm like, why are things not organizing? Or like, why is something looking funny on mobile? And it's like, what is it getting from its parent? Do I have it in a weird flex component or something like that? And you can kind of read down the tree here. One thing I actually find helpful to do as well is sometimes just go look at my code and build out that tree. I'll include a screenshot when I'm editing this and show you what my whiteboard looked like the other day when I was debugging why this website wouldn't move these pieces together. And sometimes it literally helps to just get out a whiteboard or a piece of paper and just draw out the tree of, okay, I have this container, and then I've got this container inside this container that I'm telling to do that, and then you can kind of get to what's actually happening with it. If you're doing anything with like global state management and using Redux, this is also a great debugging tool where you can kind of see what does Redux think is happening, because sometimes that's where your problem is going to be. If you're trying to get info from Redux and it's not correct in Redux, well, then, maybe the way you're pulling it's absolutely correct, but it's just not set correctly in Redux. And so then that's where you need to make sure you're setting it correctly in Redux. And it just kind of helps you pinpoint where exactly the problem is, which is exactly what you want to do when you're trying to debug. Some other things I kind of like are in this memory section. If you have any like local storage, that's an application. If you have any like local storage things that you're keeping track of, you can see and hear what it's reading from local storage, what's been saved there. You can also go over to network if you want to see any like API calls. Are they going through? Are they working? Are they failing? What are they returning back? And a great thing you can do here too is, for instance, if you're having some cache issues, you can disable the cache. I actually just learned that this week, so it'll show you what it's like to load a web page without things that are already cached. You can also, I'd forgotten about this one, you can throttle. So if you're trying to check loading, which is actually something I was debugging just yesterday, you can make your web page load a little bit slower, even if you're on fast Wi-Fi, just because it will help you have longer time to actually see what the loading state is and what's going on there to debug anything. So, pro tip from one of my coworkers, make sure if you turn that on to turn it back off, because otherwise you'll be like, why is my internet so slow? So those are some great tools. And of course, Google is a fantastic tool, right? Like, we don't know a lot of things. There's just so much you can never know everything about coding. And so half the time just knowing what to Google is honestly the toughest part. So sometimes I will ask my coworkers, I will literally say in human words, why is my build not working with not adding CSS when I deploy to Netlify? And obviously if I Google those questions, I might get some helpful stuff, but I also might not. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll literally take my question in my terms and then ask my coworkers who are developers and say, what are the words I need to ask Google to get to this? And you will start to learn those over time, but sometimes, you'll just be like, oh, I didn't know it was called that. And then there's tons of content about how to do that, or things on Stack Overflow. So definitely lean on that. And when you're grabbing solutions from Stack Overflow, there's no shame in copying and pasting. I do encourage you to try to understand why it works when it works if you do that. But at the same time, that's a totally valid solution. It's not cheating. If people are sharing solutions and that solution works for you, that's exactly what Stack Overflow is meant to do. So those are some tools. Next, I kind of want to talk about some mental models and some systems. So we'll move on to that. So we've talked through some tools, and there's plenty of other tools out there, by the way, but those are just some of the ones I use most commonly. But sometimes it comes down more to the skill of your mental models and having systems for debugging. And this is where I find really helpful, because you're not always going to have a tool. Sometimes these tools aren't even going to make it more clear right away, and sometimes you don't even know what you need to do in those tools. They're not going to automatically tell you what's wrong. You have to kind of think through how to use them. So sometimes you need a system and a model that you can apply the tool to. So first of all, always start by breaking it down. It can feel really intimidating when you're like, this doesn't work and I have no idea why. Start by figuring out what is working about it, and at what point does it stop working. Can you think of a simpler version of it and build step by step until you get to the point where it doesn't work, and then you know exactly what step it's at so you can try to fix more pieces there. For instance, if you have an input and an output that's not giving you what you want in the output, can you simplify the output? For instance, when I was just last week building an array that needed to take a really complicated piece, to actually take two complicated arrays and then parse through them to get what I want to concatenate and put together what I actually wanted. But I didn't start out by writing all that code at once and then wondering like, oh, why doesn't this work? I started by, first of all, can I print what I need from the first array? Yes, I can do that. Can I print what I need from the second array? Yes, I can do that. Can I put the two of them together? Yes, I can do that. Now, can I add a filter on top of that to only return the things I want from this concatenated filter? And yes, I can do that. Whereas if I'd gone straight for that final step, I would have never gotten to that. Or at least I wouldn't have known where it was broken, and I'd have been like, well, this doesn't work and I don't know why. And so building step by step definitely helps a lot. I also recommend working with what you've got. So for instance, if you've ever built anything with Legos, I've recently started renewing my interest in Legos, and I was building last night, and I just couldn't find where the right piece that I needed was. And I was so mad because unlike puzzles, you just can't move forward to the next step if your Lego isn't there. You know what I mean? Like with the puzzle, you just be like, I can't find this piece. I'll go try to find another piece. But with Legos, you kind of need that piece right now. So I couldn't find it. And rather than panicking and freaking out, I was like, I'm just going to stop and work with what I have. I have all of these pieces. Let me sort them out. And so I sorted them out into piles, and I was like, okay, these look like this, these are these colors, these look like this. And sure enough, eventually I did find the piece I was looking for. So sometimes just take a step back, work with what you've got, and try to, kind of back to making it simple, break it down into its smallest components, pieces, and sort out each piece, and then go from there. So yeah, another good way, think about, are there other ways to attempt this? So for instance, are there other ways to go about this problem? Like if you're having a really tough way of getting, this thing to work, is there another way entirely to go about it that may be simpler or just may work, and you can figure out why your other way didn't work later if you care? So yeah, I definitely recommend that. And another thing I recommend, rubber ducking. You've probably heard of it before. It's the most common debugging advice. It's rubber ducking, and the concept is that you just talk out what your problem is to an inanimate object, and by talking through it, sometimes it will help you unlock what's going on with it. And so that's why I've actually started finding live streams kind of cool, and I might start doing some more of that, because even if the people in the chat can't help me with my bug, just hearing myself kind of talk through it really does help me kind of sort out what's going on with it. Like you probably saw just now in this earlier video where I was like, why is this saying event the whole time? Well, I talked through it and eventually realized like, oh yeah, I'm not even setting the selected tab, so why would that state update? So anyways, I have a cute rubber duck. I have several other rubber ducks. You could use a pet. You can use literally anything. I have several Funko Pops. Those could also work. So I definitely recommend doing that. And then the last thing I want to say is there's no shame in getting help. You're not meant to do this alone. Developer is a team sport, and you have coworkers, or if you don't have coworkers, then you have colleagues across the internet like me, and you have different Slack groups you can join. You have different Stack Overflow, different places, Reddit, you can ask for help. Please do that. Ways to do that effectively are important, because totally fine to ask for help. And if you see people getting mad at other people for asking for help, first of all, they shouldn't. Second of all, it's probably because they didn't approach it in the right way. So here's how you can approach it in the right way to actually get the help you need. First of all, explain the problem and demonstrate it. So if you can show screenshots, or even better, a screen recording of it happening, that's going to be great. That's going to give you everything you need. That's going to really help whoever's trying to help you debug fully see what's going on, because sometimes you might think you can word it in a way that makes sense, but if they can't see your code, or if they can't see what's the intended behavior versus the expected behavior, it's going to be really confusing. Next, explain what you've tried. This is really, really, really helpful for getting assistance with debugging, because nobody likes it when somebody just like is being lazy in the sense of like, oh, I have no idea what's going on, and just post a question. Not that, and I fear people take this to the other extreme and work way too hard before asking for help, but you're watching this, you're not those people. So just don't let yourself feel lazy. Instead, just show what you've already done. It doesn't matter if you spent 5 minutes or 5 hours. Like, just show, quickly, I've looked at this, I've looked at this. Explain what you know it's not, if you can. So for instance, say, I know it's not this thing. I have no idea what it is, but it's not the state. It's not that the state's not getting it updated. It's not that it's not in Redux. It's not that it's not firing. Show that. And then show anything you do know about it. For instance, if you're like, I do know this data lives in Redux. I do know it's there. I don't know why it's not coming in through here. And explain what is still unknown. So just be very clear about, again, that expected versus observed behavior. And so it's like, this is what is still unknown based on what I've tried and what it's doing. So I hope this helps. I have a Slack community with people like me who are junior to intermediate to rising senior developers, and we're all trying to learn things together. You're welcome to come and join it. We can't always solve each other's problems right away, but we're a good community to talk to about this stuff, and you're totally welcome to come join. We'd love to have you. Sometimes we play games, sometimes we share fun articles, and sometimes we're just quiet and we do work. So anyways, feel free to come join. Would love to have you there, and I definitely encourage you to get plugged in with some sort of community of people who can help you on this dev journey, because it's tough, and especially debugging, it can make you want to bang your head on a wall and just be incredibly frustrating. But you've got this, you can do this, and you don't have to do it alone. So I will see you next time, and comment on here if you've got any questions.